You know what's wild? Most people are still overpaying for car insurance just because it's a pain to switch. That's why there's Jerry. Jerry's the only app that compares rates from over 50 insurers in minutes and helps you switch fast with no spam calls or hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Before you renew your car insurance policy, do yourself a favor. Download the Jerry app or head to jerry.ai/Libsyn. That's JERRY.ai/LIBSYN.
Oh yeah, look at my life. Hey now, yeah. Oh yeah, look at my life out here on the road.
Hey now.
Hey now.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9, and here's hoping the luck of the Irish is with you today. On this episode, and I do apologize for everyone in various parts of the country outside of Ontario, but today is going to be a fairly Ontario-centric episode. However, if I'm being honest, I think no matter what corner of the country you're in, you'll be able to find some of this amusing. In fact, some of you in other provinces outside of Ontario, looking at Ontario and the clown show that it has turned into, may find this actually kind of funny, maybe a little ironic as well. So stick around on this episode, even if you're not an Ontarian, so to speak, because I think there's going to be some good stuff in here. And by the way, towards the end of this episode, the latest from President Trump on the invasion of Iran, and I'm going to try and squeeze in a few other things too. But I want to do a deep dive into some of the things that came out of the Ontario government yesterday. Let's start off with the announcements.
Trump's tariffs take direct aim at the Canadian businesses and workers. Our government has a plan to protect Ontario.
Okay, you know what? I'm not even, nope. Absolutely not. I'm not doing it. That was Ontario Premier Doug Ford doing his typical blame everything on Donald Trump and the tariffs. He opens with that every time he's in front of a microphone. And frankly, I think at this point, everybody in Canada understands that the vast majority of the problems that we were dealing with were long before Donald Trump. He certainly created some new ones, but for our politicians to try and blame everything on Donald Trump is just outrageous. They have work to do, and they would rather blame Trump than actually do the hard work. So forgive me, but I'm going to skip over the opening remarks here from Doug Ford. Let's get into some of the meat and potatoes, shall we?
We need the federal government to follow through with their promise to reform Canada's broken bail system and keep repeat offenders behind bars. My message to the federal government: enough has gone by, enough time has gone by. Stop dilly-dallying and let's start moving forward on the bail reform. We also need to make sure that we're putting the rights of victims ahead of criminals. You know, you always hear about charter this, charter that, charter rights for criminals.
Yeah, who needs the charter? Charter this, charter that, screw the charter. I assume he's going somewhere with that, but I'm not going to give him the oxygen to do that at the moment. Although I will pick up the Premier's remarks again in just a sec. Hey, by the way, if you're new to the pod, just so you know, what I like to do in here every day is bring you a lot more context than you hear from the mainstream media. See, I think you can learn a lot more about what our leaders are up to if you hear their full remarks, not the 10 or 15-second soundbite that you see on the news. So you're going to hear some long-form clips, and you're going to hear some analysis from me. And there are a lot of new listeners that have dipped into Scott Fox After 9 over the last number of weeks. So thank you very much. If you're one of my new listeners, I appreciate it. Now, that there is Ontario Premier Doug Ford calling out the federal government for dilly-dallying, I believe he attempted to say, on the bail reform. Now, that's something that I think everybody agrees we needed. We need bail reform, and the feds assure us it's coming. I do want to point out, though, that a lot of the dilly-dallying when it comes to bail reform could have been avoided. We had a choice a year ago, and there was two options on the table. You could vote for a conservative platform, which by all accounts was very tough on crime, and it promised an immediate change to bail reform. Or the way that we went with the current Liberal government. And the Liberal government has now had a year, and we are still waiting for the bail reform to pass. Which party do you think Doug Ford supported in the election? Yeah, the one that still hasn't done bail reform. Could have had this already, by the way. We could have had it already, but Doug decided to back the wrong horse there. So let's move on and hear a little bit more from the premier.
I think I'll keel over if I ever hear one of the judges out there say they're going to have charter rights for the victims that carry these crimes for a lifetime. Well, these criminals are out on the streets repeating and repeating and repeating offenses. That's why last week we wrote to the federal government asking them to legalize the use of pepper spray for self-defense. It's a common sense way to help people, especially women in vulnerable situations, to protect themselves and their family. Let's say a woman's leaving a job at night and walking home. She needs something to defend herself. You know, after all these crazy lunatics are running around because our courts are letting these people out on bail, folks, they don't get out on bail once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times, just to repeat the offenses. You know, we've all lived here our whole lives. Did we ever see this 10 years ago? 15 years ago? No, we've never seen this. We've seen it starting about 5 years ago. It's running rampant across Ontario, and we're going to put an end to it.
I believe what Doug Ford is trying to say without actually saying is we brought an onslaught of people to this country, and some of them are very interested in committing very serious crimes. And we have a court system that lets them out on bail. Well, in defense of the judges are doing what the direction was to do. They automatically default to bail unless the Crown can prove the person shouldn't have bail, and they often do side with the criminal. The premier is quite right about that. I'm not 100% sure about the timing there, that in the last 5 years this has gotten out of control. But again, I would remind the premier, we had a choice a year ago, and the premier decided to vote for the party that now in a year has not done a thing when it comes to bail reform. We're still waiting for it. Now, that was an interesting suggestion, though, that we should be able to carry pepper spray legally. Did you know that you're not allowed to carry pepper spray? I find that there's people out there who didn't necessarily know that. You are allowed to carry bear spray, which is very similar to pepper spray, but it's not pepper spray. So while you're out walking your dog, for example, there's many people who carry around a little canister of bear spray or dog spray. They can carry it on your keychain or what have you, and it's a good little thing that you can reach for if, God forbid, you ever need it. Now, I do agree with Premier Ford there that there are some serious concerns, particularly for women. We're not exactly living in the safest area here, and I would love to think that whether it's my mom, my daughter, my partner, or whomever, they've got the ability to defend themselves if, God forbid, they ever end up in a bad situation. But what the premier is suggesting here is that the federal government should allow us to carry pepper spray for self-defense. I just want to point out a few things here, and I'm not necessarily opposed to this idea. I just want to put out a few things that maybe the premier didn't think of. Number one, pepper spray. It doesn't exactly come out of a can when you spray it like how cooking spray would. It comes out in a bit of a cloud from time to time. You've probably experienced that yourself, particularly when you're down to the end of a canister. Sometimes it doesn't come out all that evenly. So what that means is that if you reach for the pepper spray and you don't exactly spray it right on, or you don't exactly have a great brand of it, you could end up just creating a cloud of pepper spray and inadvertently incapacitating yourself, not just the attacker. You could end up incapacitating yourself and not the attacker, and then that makes the situation even worse. You've got to be careful when you're handling pepper spray, and I say this as someone who does actually have some. With pepper spray, you usually press down with your thumb and the pepper spray will come out. It's very easy for a little bit of that to get on your thumb. Maybe even drip down your hand onto your finger. And then what does that do? Well, you touch your eye or something like that, and bam, you've incapacitated yourself again. And that's not necessarily ideal. I don't think anybody wants to be at a further disadvantage if they're ever, again, God forbid, being attacked. Is pepper spray really the right idea here? Because there is a lot of ways that this could go sideways, not the least of which is the attacker could get a hold of it and end up spraying you. So let me put this out there. Let me just float this out there. Since we're talking about self-defense, and I think that is a great topic that is worth discussing, while we're talking about self-defense, maybe pepper spray isn't the best idea, maybe we should take it up one notch further. Maybe we should be allowed to carry personal tasers. What would be wrong with that? What would be wrong with an individual having a personal size and you can carry them in your pocket? They fit in your purse. You could even carry it on your keychain. What would be wrong with carrying a personal taser? And if somebody comes up behind you and tries to grab you, all it's going to take is being touched just a little bit with that. And bam, they're going to get the shock of a lifetime, certainly enough to make them back off in the vast majority of cases. Wouldn't that be more effective and make sure that nobody inadvertently gets sprayed? You know, one of the things about pepper spray is there's a temptation to use it because you can spray it from several feet away. What if you're in a verbal confrontation with someone and you feel like you're being threatened? You might be inclined to pull out the pepper spray and spray that person. That could end up putting you, with a lack of castle laws, in a dangerous legal situation yourself. I'm not 100% sure that this is the best idea. I kind of like where the premier is going with this, but I think we need to refine this idea. I'd also note that the Association of Chiefs of Police has not come out and endorsed this plan yet, and I have a feeling the police may have an issue with people carrying around pepper spray. But then again, bear spray is legal, so why would pepper spray not be legal? A lot of questions here. I'm hoping that this comes up again during the Q&A. But let's get back to Premier Ford's remarks.
We're also pushing for the federal government to collect DNA from people arrested for serious sexual offenses to speed up investigations and bring criminals to justice. I find it ironic that these criminals get arrested. First thing that happens, they get their fingerprints. Why are we not taking DNA samples from them immediately? So I'm going to be all over the federal government on those two issues about pepper spray and making sure we take DNA samples off every single person. As we crack down on criminals, we're investing in our jails to ensure not having enough space is never an excuse to grant offenders an early release. And I heard the judges as well. I'm not pounding on judges because there's a lot of great judges, but there's some terrible ones out there. Bleeding heart judges that constantly let people out. And they always use an excuse. Well, it may not be safe in this one jail, or it's overcrowded. So we're going to let these criminals go out and have a merry old time, and let's just keep reoffending. Across the province, we're building new jails and redeveloping existing ones to increase capacity now and for the long term. As a result of our investments, Ontario is on track to add over 1,400 new beds to our capacity, a number that we're going to increase by hundreds more in the coming months. Which brings us for today's announcement that we move forward on work to start building the new Brockville Correctional Centre and expand the St. Lawrence Valley Correctional and Treatment Centre, issuing a request for qualifications on this project, which will include an additional 20 beds compared to what it was previously announced, bringing the grand total to 295 beds.
All right, I think that's enough. I mean, you get the gist of what he's going for there. According to the graphic behind him, this is part of a $3 billion investment to build and expand jails and correctional facilities. $3 billion. That's just to build it. That's not the cost of actually housing inmates. I'm told that we're paying in and around $130,000 a year per inmate. Geez, if we've got 130,000, I mean, there's got to be better things we could do with this money. Wow, that's a staggering amount of money. But either way, you've heard the proposals there from Premier Ford. He's going to expand some jails. He's going to retrofit some other jails. Lots and lots and lots of jail space. He says he wants the government to move on the bail laws. He wants pepper spray to be legalized. And he wants to collect DNA samples from people accused of serious sexual offenses. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, providing that it's okay under the charter. And we've also got to make sure that if someone is not found guilty, that DNA sample gets destroyed. That's just got to be part of this. That, of course, is part of privacy. People do, from time to time, get accused of a crime that they didn't commit, or they're found not guilty. Well, in that case, then the DNA sample should be destroyed. I was led to believe we were already doing that, but hey, I might be wrong on that one. Either way, that was the announcement from Premier Ford. Now let's get to a little bit of the Q&A.
Hey, Premier Ford, Max Paris, CBC News. What do you make of the idea of giving Don Cherry the Order of Canada, given how upset many French Canadians seem to be about the idea?
Well, you know something, Don Cherry is an icon, and he has helped so many communities. And his area, obviously, is in sport, in hockey. He's so loved, and it's well overdue. But I propose this to MLC. Come to Scotiabank and let Don Cherry, and he's elderly right now, but let him drop the puck. The roof would come off Scotiabank. People love him. They would go absolutely wild. He's the most patriotic Canadian I've ever seen. So he's a champion, and I have overwhelming support for him getting the Order of Ontario. Matter of fact, he should get the Order of Canada. That's what he should be getting.
Okay, the CBC asking the important questions at the important times. Should Don Cherry get the Order of Canada? All right, I mean, since it came up, I know there's people talking about this. I'll weigh in on it too, and you're welcome to disagree with me on this, because I understand that there are some people who don't like some of the comments that Don Cherry has made in the past. Let me preface this by saying I firmly believe that Don Cherry should get the Order of Canada. In fact, when you look at the list of people that do have the Order of Canada, many of them are very polarizing individuals. I don't think there's any reason that Don Cherry shouldn't get the Order of Canada. He's certainly done a lot to create patriotism, to draw attention to one of our national sports being hockey, and so on and so forth. He has been a great Canadian, and I know how much Don loves this country. But I don't love making the Order of Canada political. I don't see a reason to make it political. We can agree or disagree on who does get it. Lobbying and making it a left versus right issue to get one particular person the Order of Canada, I don't know that that's necessarily the best way to go. And again, I do think that Don deserves it. I just don't know that the politicians should get involved. You know, I'm also seeing a lot of ads lately from the Ontario government promoting nominate someone for the Order of Ontario. I feel like when politicians really get involved in this, when they're taking a political stand on it, when they're putting out ads encouraging people to nominate someone, I feel like somehow this is going to go down the road of political donations. It's going to be patronage type assignments of this award, and I just don't want it to be political. The Order of Canada is an incredible honor, and while I don't have it, hopefully someday I will, but I don't right now, I'd love to think that it's not a political thing. That if the right party is in power, you could get the Order of Canada. It should be a completely bipartisan thing, and it should be judged on merit. And on merit, I think Don Cherry deserves it. Politicians trying to fundraise off of should Don Cherry or shouldn't he get the Order of Canada, it just feels skeezy. You know? It just seems like the politicians are cheapening the Order of Canada. And I don't really want to go down that road. Give Don the Order of Canada, and let's move on. And you know what? If this current government is going to be stubborn and not give it to him, not recognize all the different reasons that he deserves it, well, we'll have a new government eventually, and then they should do it. Doing it this way, it just seems kind of dirty.
Okay, as my follow, I guess, how does exempting yourself and your cabinet from the Freedom of Information laws make your government more transparent and accountable?
What we're doing is we're just going along. It's 40-year-old legislation that's been antiquated, and we aren't doing anything new. What we're doing is just doing exactly what the federal government is doing and what the other provinces are doing. If it's good for, I don't know, Saskatchewan, if it's good for Quebec, if it's good for other provinces, it's good for the federal government, then we need to update it. 40-year-old legislation, cell phones weren't around, computers weren't around, and so we're just following in order with the rest of the federal government and the provinces.
Okay, I know Premier Ford is going to get asked to follow up on that, so I'm going to reserve some comment on that, but let me just say here, when it comes to updating the privacy laws, the Freedom of Information laws, in Ontario right now, Premier Doug Ford is trying to change the laws, and he wants to make it retroactive so that any discussions amongst the cabinet, and including cell phone records that Doug himself has been ordered by the court twice to turn over, so that he wouldn't have to do it. And the thought here is that Doug is trying to change the law so that he doesn't have to comply with a court ruling. And the courts have all weighed in on this now. with the exception of the Supreme Court, they've agreed that the premier, who works for the taxpayers, has to maintain a level of accountability. Now, Doug decided somewhere along the line he was going to use his own personal cell phone for communicating with constituents and God knows who else. Well, that means that it's in the public domain. That means that in the name of transparency, we need to be able to find out who he's talking to and about what. Now, there is a provision here where the people's names and things like that could be redacted to protect their privacy. And Doug Ford maintains, you'll hear him say soon, that there is very, very, very confidential information in there. He's also going to make an accusation that the Chinese might be spying on him. How about this? How about going forward, Doug Ford has to carry 2 cell phones. Nobody likes to carry 2 cell phones. I understand that, but it is what it is. How about he carries 2 cell phones, one for personal and one for premier stuff? And everything that's on the premier phone is available for scrutiny. And if Doug doesn't want something to be scrutinized, then maybe he shouldn't be having that conversation. If it's something that does deserve to be scrutinized and there is sensitive information out there from taxpayers or constituents that have reached out to the premier with a personal issue, sure, we can redact that and he'll put it out redacted, no doubt. If somebody feels they need more information, then a judge would have to grant that request. But otherwise, this should be a fairly transparent thing, and it should be easy to do. 2 cell phones, and retroactively, he's going to have to release the records. That's all there is to it. Listen, if he has nothing to hide, he shouldn't be afraid to release those things. He works for us. He collects a paycheck every 2 weeks from the taxpayers. One of our basic expectations for our leaders is that there's some accountability and some transparency. It's the least we can expect from our leaders. Now, Doug is going to try and cloud the issue and say, well, the feds aren't doing it. And he's right. The federal government is not transparent in any way. They will try and stifle freedom of information requests at every turn. They do not like accountability. That doesn't mean, though, that Doug can go down to their level. It means he should rise up and set the bar for a new level of accountability. That's what the taxpayers are owed, accountability. When Doug tries to make a whole bunch of things private and secret for reasons that can only be interpreted as he lost in court, so now he's going to change the law, that stinks. And let's be honest, you can be a fierce, partisan, progressive conservative. You got to admit, that stinks.
The Premier Ford, Dan Tackman with CBC out of Kingston. I wanted to get your perspective on Alto. A lot of resistance here in Eastern Ontario, including MPP Clark standing by today to the southern route. I wondered if you have a position on where you'd like to see this high-speed rail route across your province, and if you're at all open to the suggestion from Kingston and some other regions about following the 401 corridor.
You know, I agree 100%. Follow the 401 corridor. Don't start taking farmers' lands and everything else out. Just follow the 401 corridor. It makes sense. And maybe make a stop in Kingston, because it's a little too weighted on the other side of the border. They have a few stops, but we need a couple more stops here in Ontario. But I said the exact same thing. Follow the 401 corridor. Simple.
Doug Ford weighing in on the federal government's new high-speed rail that is eventually going to go from Quebec City to Toronto. Doug advocating for more stops, which makes it less high speed if it's stopping more. But hey, that aside, he thinks it should run along the 401, and his exact words were, stop taking farmers' land. And the federal government, to build the Alto high-speed train, is going to expropriate many pieces of land that are farmland. Doug says, absolutely not. You should not do that. Okay, well, let me point out, Doug himself is expropriating farmland to build the highway that nobody asked for, Highway 413. That's the one he's building that will eventually, he says, take some of the pressure off of the 401 highway, even though we have the 407 highway, which would run right between the two of them, currently does, and people can't use it because it's too expensive, and Doug Ford refuses to buy it back. I don't know if Doug Ford's really on the high ground there morally, suggesting the federal government not expropriate farmland.
I wanted to ask you about harm reduction as well. Harm reduction workers say the closure of the remaining safe consumption sites or supervised consumption sites will result in more people dying, and that the heart hubs aren't a good substitute. How do you justify closing these last few sites?
Well, first of all, that is not factual whatsoever. A study came out for the University of Alberta. Actually, it doesn't cause more problems. It helps people. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we did it here in Brockville, they told me there's over 1,200, 1,300 visits so far helping people. The only difference is we aren't encouraging handing out needles and drugs, and there's no community that wants it. We're putting an investment of over $550 million in heart hubs that are going to help people, get them proper shelter, get them the support they need, get them employment if they need. It's working. What I don't believe in sticking these injection sites in the middle of a community down the street from a school. Needles are all over the place. It's like giving an alcoholic a card for the LCBO and saying, okay, go in there and go to town. I'm passionate about this, by the way, and that's why I approved over 500, almost more than $500 million. I don't want to hurt these people. I want to help them. I want them to be productive. Addiction's terrible. It affects families. And you talk to any family member from an addict, and they're going to say, get them help. And that's exactly what we're doing. No government has invested more in supporting people with addiction than what we have. We're going to continue doing this. We're getting rid of funding for injection sites that they encourage people, giving them needles and everything else. And the federal government giving them free drugs, like unheard of. So we're going to support people, and it's working. And please do me a favor, read the article from the University of Alberta. It was in the National Post. What they're saying, it increases. It doesn't actually. If anything, it decreases.
I actually agree with Premier Ford on that one. I think he's spot on. You know, we've been having a national conversation off and on for a while now about these safe consumption sites. And I think by and large, if I'm reading the room right, Canadian taxpayers do not want their tax dollars being used to buy drugs for addicts. They do not want their tax dollars being used to subsidize needles. They don't want these safe injection sites in their communities because it leads to a whole myriad of other problems. And because most Canadians just want to help these addicts get off of whatever addiction they're on and on a path back to a normal, prosperous life. I think we should all want that. I think we should probably agree the safe injection experiment was a failure. British Columbia was all in on this. Even they asked the federal government to stop the experiment because it wasn't going well. We weren't actually helping enough people. Full credit to Premier Ford. I'm calling balls and strikes on this podcast, and so far, that's a win for Premier Ford. That position right there, I think by and large, people will agree with that. But if you want to weigh in on this, I'm totally open to different perspectives on this. I know there's probably people listening right now that themselves struggle with addiction issues. Is it better for you if we have these safe injection sites where you can just go and no questions asked, go and get some free drugs and shoot up, and they'll make sure you don't die if you pass out, but then they just send you back on your merry way? Or should we be investing in treatments, therapies, ways to get you off of whatever you're addicted to? I think it's still a good conversation to have, but I tend to agree with Premier Ford on that particular issue.
Imagine you're a business owner relying on a dozen different software programs. Each one is expensive, overly complicated, and worst of all, none of them are connected. It can be incredibly stressful, right? Now, picture Odoo. CRM, accounting, inventory, manufacturing, marketing, HR, and more. Odoo brings all the tools your business needs into one simple platform, and all seamlessly connected. Everything works together, giving you the peace of mind that your business is running smoothly from every angle. Odoo's open source applications are user-friendly and designed to scale with your business, saving you time and money. Say goodbye to juggling multiple platforms and hello to efficient integrated management. Stop wasting resources on complicated systems and make the switch to Odoo today. Visit odoo.com. ODOO.com, and discover how Odoo can simplify and streamline your business operations. Odoo, modern management made simple.
Hi, Premier. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Laura.
Hey, back to the FOI issue.
Yes.
Why can't Ontario be more transparent than these other places you're mentioning? And you're making this retroactive. So you're trying to. So can you address this complaint that you are trying to block the release of your cell phone records, and why are you trying to hide them?
Okay, well, first of all, I'll get to my cell phone records. First, why isn't anyone jumping up and down about the federal government, Laura? You live in Ottawa. Go knock on their door and say, why is the province of Ontario duplicating what you have and the rest of the provinces? We aren't just inventing this. We aren't the first out of the gate. We're antiquated. We're 40 years old. As for my cell phone, Laura, I would like to ask the people, I'm behind 6,643 messages. People call me 1,000 people a day on very personal issues. There's confidentiality. I was sworn to confidentiality for constituents, and I'm not going to release personal confidential information about people's lives. That's what it comes down to. And there's cabinet confidentiality. If you look at the Supreme Court rulings, it's about protecting cabinet confidentiality with the Ontario Public Service. But I have an idea. Judge me or judge our party on decisions, not on conversations that we have in a cabinet office or conversations that people trust that you are not going to release. Just imagine if I released personal, and it's very personal, a lot of health stuff and everything, every personal problem people have, they call me. I feel like a psychologist every day trying to solve everyone's personal issues. That is not good to release it. Matter of fact, I learned this back at City Hall days, and I'm sure my colleagues know this. When you leave office, you have to, even if the same party gets reelected and they go in there, you have to destroy every bit of information that you have on your constituents. And it's going to start all over again with the new MPP or the new city council. That's the way it works. There has to be confidentiality. People have to be reassured when they text me, it's going to be confidential, and it will be confidential.
Okay, the Premier is really just gaslighting everybody here. I mean, that's just flat out misleading at best. If somebody is texting the Premier about deeply personal issues, that can be redacted. It doesn't need to be released to the public. And by and large, the people who want to see Doug Ford's phone records, and by the way, again, I can't stress this enough, the court has ruled on this twice, that he has to turn over his cell phone records. We can cut out any personal information. Absolutely. Nothing could link anyone to any of the texts that are in there. And of course, we don't know what was said on the phone conversations. We would only know who the Premier is speaking to. But again, that's not intended to try and find out what health issue your neighbor is dealing with. That is not what people want these records for. Doug Ford has interjected himself into a lot of different areas here, and Doug Ford needs to be accountable. This guy is spending billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars on various projects. And frankly, we'd like to know that that process was above board and done legitimately. There's questions around this Thermaeus Spa, this massive lease that he gave that company to set up at Ontario Place. He's building major road projects. He's funneling money into battery and EV plants and things like that. We would like to know exactly what went on there. Was there any sort of a quid pro quo? Was there any sort of a promise made with a wink and a nod, thinking this would never get out? The court has ruled he has to turn it over. No constituent information needs to be disclosed. None. And people aren't even interested in those personal issues. They want to know who the Premier is talking to and about what. And this wouldn't be an issue if he would have just done it properly in the first place and carried 2 damn cell phones. Nobody is interested in trying to figure out when your neighbor called Doug Ford because they're pissed off that it's going to take 6 months to get an MRI. That's not what anyone is interested in here. We want to know about some of the alleged backroom deals. We want to know what's going on with the Greenbelt scandal. That's still in front of the RCMP. There's certain things that the taxpayers have a right to know about. Our Premier controls our money. He controls our laws. And frankly, that comes with an added layer of scrutiny and accountability. To completely bar the media from making certain freedom of information requests. To bar the media from being able to look into which developers he's talking to and see when they coincide with various announcements that were made. That's not right. Him trying to blame Mark Carney because he doesn't want to be accountable is not right. And we got to call out what's right and what's wrong. He was right about the safe injection sites. He is dead wrong on the accountability here from his cell phone. He decided one cell phone, my personal cell phone, that's what I'm going to use it for. There is a certain level of accountability and transparency that is expected of our leaders. And Doug Ford damn well better adhere to that, or he should step down. And if he wants to fight it in court as a private citizen, let him. How much of our tax dollars are being used for him to keep fighting this? Why doesn't he just be transparent in the first place? If he doesn't have anything to hide, if there's nothing in his cell phone records that would lead the taxpayers to say, wait a second, this smells like corruption. This smells like backroom deals. This smells like a hidden agenda. Then what's he afraid of?
I drove down from Perth and filled up my truck. I pretty well had to take a mortgage out on my house to do that.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Sir, could you comment on the U.S. and Iran war, and specifically what your thoughts are when the Strait of Hormuz might be opened and gas prices could fall? Is there an end game for you in this?
Well, first of all, I share your sentiment because I fill up my car. When I escape from my OPP, I fill it up and away I go. It was $1.67 last night. It's outrageous. Do you know what solves all our problems? Let's start getting a pipeline built across our country. Let's bring it down to Sarnia. Let's get the pipeline over to the Irving refinery in New Brunswick. That would relieve it. Right now, we're relying on people from around the world, and some of those people don't even like us. But I think the U.S. and Israel are doing the right thing. The Iranian regime has killed tens of thousands of their own people, innocent people, and they're just a bunch of tyrants as far as I'm concerned. And we have to bring peace to the Middle East. And I encourage them to keep going because people want them. The 90 million people want freedom. We had a rally, or I didn't. They did. I showed up. There's over 350,000 Iranians that are there supporting freedom because their people are under siege and being the heinous stories that I've heard too. They have to get rid of them and get rid of the leadership as quickly as possible and have democratic elected leaders.
I'm really surprised that a reporter thought that was a good question to ask a Canadian premier, but since they did, full credit to Doug Ford. I happen to agree with him on that particular issue as well. I think the Iranian regime had to go. This is a bit of a change of posture, though, for Doug Ford, who normally suffers from what others call the Trump derangement syndrome. And normally he comes completely unglued and irrational anytime the topic of Donald Trump comes up. Pleasantly surprised. Maybe this is a new Doug Ford in that he is not flying off the handle and trying to create an international incident here. I thought that was the right remark to make. I agree with him that the Iranians want freedom. I agree with him that they deserve peace in their country and they deserve to get out from under this oppressive regime. I'm surprised to hear him basically compliment the Americans and the Israelis, but either way, I think he's right on that particular issue.
Thank you, Harper Cody with NBC Media News here in Brockville. Premier Ford, what do you say to the local residents here who, with this expansion, may be concerned?
Hired over 20,000 doctors since we've been in office, We've done.
One quick follow-up for you. Just what does the continued plan look like right now to cut down on our long wait times in our emergency rooms in our local hospitals, Premier?
Well, what we've done, we've invested, we're investing over $60 billion in 50 sites across the province. You're either getting a new hospital or you're getting an addition to the hospital. We've registered and hired over 20,000 doctors since we've been in office, over 100,000 nurses. We're playing for medical. We're actually building medical.
I'm going to cut the premier off there. He has absolutely zero to brag about when it comes to health care. And really, I mean, when you think about the things that you want and need from your provincial government, I think most people would agree, by and large, education and healthcare are the top two priorities. Those, by the way, are the ones that the premier does not like to talk about. And that's why he defaults to those generic talking points that he's making there. This is a man who's funneling billions and billions and billions of dollars into healthcare, and the results are actually worse than they were. So I don't think he's got much to say here on this particular topic. I'll skip that one.
Yes, hi, Premier. I'm Kevin Inglis with the Brockvillist here in Brockville.
Hi, Kevin.
So, Premier, I just wanted to go back to the updated Freedom of Information laws. You said that modernizing the Freedom of Information process means bringing Ontario in line with the federal government and other provinces. My question is, if this modernization will only make it harder for normal people to access government records in Ontario, should the province not be aiming to modernize its laws while retaining, if not improving, citizens' access to information to be a positive standout in Canada?
Oh, I've been taking all the questions, Steve, over to you. He's heading it up. But again, we aren't going to be antiquated 40 years old legislation. We're following the federal government. We're following the other provinces. Folks, this isn't anything new. It's not pulling a rabbit out of your hat. We're just duplicating what other jurisdictions across the province have. But I'll hand it over to Minister Crawford.
For anybody through the public service.
Okay, I'm going to skip over the remarks from this Crawford guy. I think he's an MPP from Oakville, and frankly, I feel like he's lying to people, just straight up lying to people about why Doug Ford wants to change these laws. This is very simple. Doug Ford is trying to make this a race to the bottom when it comes to transparency and accountability. Doug Ford has a lot of questions that need to be answered. There are active investigations into this government. The court has ruled he must release his cell phone records. Making it harder for regular people to figure out what their government is up to is not the answer. Doug Ford doesn't seem to understand he's not the king. He still has to have accountability to the people who elected him. Why is that such a hard thing to understand? This talking point that we've got all these old, antiquated laws that are 40 years old. We had laws from before there was cell phones. You know, it would take 5 minutes to sit down and create the modern equivalent without losing any accountability or transparency. But that's not what Doug Ford wants to do. Doug Ford is actually going to try and make the federal government the bad guys here. Well, they're not accountable, so I don't have to be either. That's nonsense. Everyone knows that's nonsense. Everyone wants to know, what is Doug Ford up to? Everyone has heard enough about what this government is doing that they have some questions about how business gets done. And if there's anything in there that could normally be accessed through a Freedom of Information request, which is our right to be able to make those as taxpayers and the media, then we have a right to that information. For Doug to cover it up and say, well, the feds don't, so we're not going to bother either, is just flat out wrong.
We'll no longer be able to. So we will do what it takes to protect the people of Ontario.
Thank you. I think you're being too politically correct. We got to protect ourselves against the communist Chinese that are infiltrating our country, Canada, the U.S., everything into our education system, into high-tech companies. That's who we have to protect from, too. So it's serious. It's absolutely serious.
There's just no, I mean, oh my God. I'm probably going to have to wrap it up after this, everybody. I know I said I'd probably play some Trump for you. I'm not going to have time. And you know what? I don't really care either. I just want this war, or whatever it is, the military action against Iran, to end. I don't need to get caught up in the day-to-day of Donald Trump, and I don't think you do either. When there's news to report, I'll report it. So I'm going to skip the Trump stuff, and I'm going to end on this. Doug Ford, throwing absolutely anything he can at the wall, looking for something to stick, because he knows the poll numbers are bad, and he basically has become toxic with a lot of voters. It's not looking good for Doug at this point. This is a Hail Mary trying to blame it on the Chinese. Doug should deal with healthcare and education first and foremost. And if he gets bored, hey, why don't you throw out some proper funding for families that have children on the autism spectrum? Why don't we deal with some of those other issues? Why don't we do that? For him to now say he needs to be able to protect his records so the Chinese don't find out what we're up to is just a special level of crazy. What's in your cell phone records that the Chinese might consider strategic information, Doug? If you don't want to give us names and dates and who's and what's and where's and why's, just tell us what the topic is. What's in your cell phone records that the Chinese might consider some strategic advantage? It's bananas. Just completely bananas. Jesus. Friends, I gotta go. I'm gonna go home and have a beer now. I have to after listening to that because it was completely asinine and the gaslighting is next level. I did get a complaint the other day though. Somebody suggested, Scott, you're supposed to be a conservative. Why are you being so hard on Doug Ford? I haven't changed. Doug has changed. Doug's policies no longer align with the mainstream public, with the middle class. The guy's lost it, if he ever had it. When Doug Ford turned his back on middle class families, when he cut that OSAP funding with no notice at all, and then chastised students and actually picked on them, made fun of them, called them out, said they were wasting taxpayer money. That's when I knew this is a man who has lost his way, that no longer understands who voted for him. And frankly, every day I hear from more and more middle class voters that say, I'd almost rather go back to the Liberals than keep putting up with this nonsense. Healthcare and education. Those are the two things we want from the province, right? Those are the two big things. There's a reason those are the two things he does not want to talk about. But you know what? I'm open to evolve on this. If Doug Ford changes his mind, if he uses just a little bit of common sense and realizes those OSAP cuts, we can't just do those immediately. We've got to give people notice. If he actually backtracks on these freedom of information changes and wants to hold an accountable and open government, I'm open to evolving. I'm not completely off the bandwagon, but right now, I can't support what's going on here, friends. I just can't. You want to weigh in on that? Shoot me a DM at Scott Fox on Air. Listener DMs coming up on Friday. Tomorrow, I'll have a more well-balanced issue for you, or episode for you. I will try and cover many other topics, and assuming Doug doesn't go crazy again today, then I will hopefully be able to talk about different things tomorrow. Have yourselves a great one. I'll catch you right back here in less than 24 hours. Happy St. Paddy's Day. I'll leave you with the sounds of Pat James and the whole truth. Hey now.